No matter how steadily Maxine stroked Bonesy's fur, the dog wouldn't settle. Maxine had cuddled close to the dog in the pickup cab, but still, he hadn't stopped whining and whimpering since Jeff and the others had disappeared into the pizzeria. Bouncy's jaws were frozen with drool, and his whole body was quivering. It was making Maxine nervous, primarily because Bonesy's anxiety was contagious, and Maxine didn't need the dog's apprehension added to her own. She was planning to exit it already. For maybe the 20th or 15th time, Maxine pushed up the calf of the long-sleeved black shirt she wore for this stupid, ill-convinced venture. She frowned at the digital numbers on her black sport watch. Where the hell are they? Maxine asked herself. Enough was enough. Maxine couldn't sit here waiting any longer. She couldn't imagine what was taking them so long. They were supposed to make a quick mess, grab everything valuable and come back out. That shouldn't have taken this much time. Huffing, Maxine reached to the driver's side's door handle. She flung the door open. Before Maxine could move a muscle and leave the pickup, Bonesy leaped across her. In a fraction of a second, the dog was out of the truck and bolting away. Bonesy, wait! Maxie scrambled out of the car and started after her dog. Bonesy! She shouted out. Bonesy didn't break stride. He crossed the broken effort of the flash of fur. Maxine ran, but before she made it to the even 10 feet, Bonesy had disappeared into the trees at the edge of the pizzeria's lot. Maxine stopped. Her heart was a jackhammer in her chest. Her mind immediately filled with images of Bonesy getting lost, or stolen, or hit by a car, or mauled by a wild animal. Maxine hugged herself. Reluctantly, she turned back to the pickup. She couldn't outrun her dog. Her best bet was to go after him in the trunk. But she didn't have the keys. Her brother did. Maxine had no choice. She had to go inside the building and get Jeff so they can go after Bonesy. Maxine looked up at the open loading dock door. What lay beyond it looked like a yawning opening of a demon's lair. Not smart, Maxine muttered, as she took a step forward. Yeah, but she didn't have a better idea, so she kept going. Picking her way across the dirty, disintegrating concrete of the loading dock, Maxine went slowly, allowing her eyes time to adjust to the infiltrated light. Once she had more night vision, she was able to spy a flattened door. That must have been the battered sound she heard right after Jeff and the others had disappeared from her sight. Maxine crept forward. She reached the doorway and leaned through it. She peered left and right and saw what was on the third door of the pizzeria's stainless steel-filled industrial kitchen. Jeff? Maxine called softly. Nothing but silence answered her. Maxine gurgled stepped into the kitchen. She looked around. Carl? She cried. This time, Maxine got a response of sort. The thrill of a child's laughter came from behind Maxine. The sound felt like a light touch, a tickle between her shoulder blades. Maxine twirled around. Immediately she saw an ounce of the laughter. Standing in the muted golden lemonade emanating from the door of the opposite side of the kitchen, a little handsy-haired boy stared at Maxine coldly. No smile, no expression at all. The child's expression was blank. He must be lost, Maxine thought, and traumatized. Maxine opened her mouth to say hello, but the boy turned and dashed away before she could even begin her greetings. He flashed through the doorway and disappeared in the dabbles of gray outside the kitchen. Hey, wait! Maxine shouted. No longer thinking of her brother or Bonesy, Maxine stood forward, following the boy. The last little kid trumped through everything. She had to help him. Exiting the kitchen, Maxine found herself in a long hallway that was as dark and uninviting as an abandoned tunnel in a coal mine. She looked left and right down to the black and white checkerboard floor. It was empty. Hello? Maxine called. The word danced down the hall, spun around and came back. A oppressive hush chased it. Maxine tried again, more loudly. Hello? Once again, the world tore around from her and came flying back. Once again, uttering stillness followed it. Maxine frowned, gazing down the hall again, both ways. Which direction should she go? Max shrugged. She turned to her left. Cold. The world came out to two syllables. Cold. It was a child's voice. From the pitch, it sounded like the same little boy who had giggled. The sound came from the right end of the hallway. Maxine reversed her direction. She took a step forward. Warmer. The same little boy's voice. Playful. Maxine made a face. You gotta be kidding me, she muttered. The kid wasn't as traumatized as she thought he was. Maybe he wasn't even lost. Still, she should probably find him in case he was. And he still needed to find Jeff, too. Maxine took a step forward. Her head sniveled left and right, all her nerves were on the alert. For the next few minutes, Maxine pushed deeper into the bowels of the tomb-like building, pausing to listen to closed doors, but lacking the courage to open them. Maxine followed it halfway until I went around a corner. Warmer, the boy said again. His voice sounded both close and far away at the same time. Maxine still couldn't figure out where the kid was. It's almost like he was in the walls, moving along with her. But that was impossible. Maxine looked down the stretch of corridor in front of her, and for the first time since she left the kitchen, she saw movement. A set of double doors at the far end of the hall was swinging, as if someone had just pushed through them. Maxine eyed the wagging doors. Had the boy come through here, or was it something else? Maxine opened her mouth to call her brother's name, but some instincts closed her mouth again, wrapping her arms around herself to ward off the chill that made it feel like her skin was itching its way along the bones. Maxine walked slowly towards the door. Each of her steps took a shy cadence of a wreck illuminated tap, tap, tap. Maxine, fighting the overpowered urge to run into the opposite direction, forced herself forward. She felt oddly disconnected from herself, as if it wasn't so much moving as she was being moved. It felt like she was being compelled through a black hole by some magnetic force. And then she was pushing through the double doors herself. Halfway through them, she paused. Pencil lines of golden light, 3 of them, inched toward Maxine. She looked ahead of them, and she realized she was seeing sunlight coming through dirty, narrow windows. The light was odd, almost impotent tone. Maxine took another step and let go of the doors. A slush and a tickle of air currently told her the doors were falling close behind her. "Hello?" Maxine called. "Are you in here?" When she got no answers again, Maxine checked her surroundings. As soon as she did, her crawling skin picked up the pace, and so did her heart pace. What is this place? Maxine rotated to take the metal shelving and stainless steel work tables. Her gaze scanned piles of tools and what looked like robotic parts. Metal legs and arms and torsos and eyeless heads were. Maxine's gaze stopped scanning and locked in. It had gotten stuck on something Maxine hadn't noticed at first. Beyond the work tables, a reclining metal chair with straps sat empty. Above the chair, in space throughout the metal pendant lights hang low, dripping only the barest hint of aluminum. That's not good, Maxine thought. Maxine so wanted to run. Why wasn't she running? Against her own will, Maxine took another step into the room. She intended to look around to see if she could spot the little boy, but her gaze remained riveted from the chair. Even when Maxine felt a shiver of warning skitter down her spine, the sensation of being watched strong and urged. She kept her gaze fixed on the chair. For all she knew, the monster was behind her, but she couldn't seem to turn to find out. Psst! It was the little boy again, close and loud. Maxine whelped and finally spun around. She scrutinized the area behind her, but she couldn't see the kid. Where was he? Maxine was getting really tired of this game. It was beyond creepy in here. The raw parts Maxine had first seen on the room were bad enough, but now her gaze had landed on a more complete robot, an animatronic, a big one. Maxine had to tilt her head back to inspect the whole link. The jitters were still prompting Maxine to run kicked up a notch, but Maxine stepped where she was. She studied the massive thing guardedly. What Maxine was looking at appeared to be a discommissioned version of one of the animal characters that had been part of the pizzeria's heyday. In fact, Maxine thought as she looked at the broken down bear more closely, this might have been Freddy himself. Although the stiff, ragged-looking robotic bear had all its part intact, unlike whatever critters had lost the pieces lying around the room, it had seen better days. Its brown fur, manted and grunty, and smelling disgustingly of decay, had large chunks missing, as if something had eaten its way through the plush covering from the inside. The missing piece of fur revealed ropey twins of wires and sharp lengths of aging metal. The bare face was the most intact part of the robot's structure. Its impossibly wide mouth was stuffed full of what looked like very sharp white teeth, and its round white eyes were in a pristine condition. "In here!" It was the little boy again. His voice was muffled, and it was coming from. Maxine gave herself a mental shake. That can't be right, she thought. But replaying the boy's words in her head, Maxine realized she had heard what she thought she heard. The boy's voice was coming from inside the ratty bear. How the heck did you get in there? Maxine asked. Her question was hushed, disbelievable. Steadying herself, Maxine took a step forward. She kept an eye unwavering on the bear. She stepped forward yet again. Hesitant an instant, she finally leaned in and put her ear against the grimy bear's chest. Maxine immediately heard a childish giggle. She jumped back and gawed at the bear's belly. The kid was inside the bear. How did he... It didn't matter. Maxine had to get the kid out of the thing. Giggling or not, the boy was little, and Maxine couldn't just leave him in a mountain of gross fur and metal. But how was she going to get the boy out? Maxine walked around the bear. Gingerly, she poked and pushed the various parts of the enemy. There must be a switch or something, she thought. Nothing that Maxine messed with on the bear did anything except the jaw. When Maxine reached and put her hand against the side of the bear's head, the jaw moved. Encouraged, Maxine shifted her hand and levered the jaw downward. The bear's mouth yawned apart, revealing an opening that got bigger and bigger and bigger. Maxine juggled up the huge gaping hole that now made up the lower half of the bear's face. She frowned at the aperture. Was it big enough for a child to get through? Probably. But from where Maxine stood, well, below the bear's opening mouth, she couldn't see down inside the bear. Maxine looked around the room. She needed something to stand on. Maxine spotted a folding chair stuck against the end of one of the long shelves. She strode over and grabbed it. Bringing the dirty gray metal chair back to the animatronic, Maxine positioned in front of the bear's legs. She stepped on top of the chair's seat. The chair let out a snapping ping and it wobbled, but it held. Maxine shifted her feet and leaned towards the gaping mouth. It was amazing how a human being could powerfully want to do one thing and yet do the opposite thing. Every fiber of Maxine's being was yelling no, and she put her face towards the bear's parted teeth. As soon as Maxine got close enough for the mouth, she tilted her head to look down inside the cavity of the bear's torso. She gasped as the small hand rose up, reaching toward her face. "Dare you," Maxine began, but then her words and her face were snatched downward. The little hand had seized her by the mouth. Small fingers curled around her lower teeth and lip. It yanked, and Maxine, squealing, was heaving downward through the metal-filled tunnel wrapped in wires. Maxine was on the skinny side, but she wasn't skinny enough to fit comfortably through the confines of an animatronic Tetra. Metal scoring at her skin, Maxine screamed as her feet came off the chair. Vaguely aware of the sound of the chair chattering on the floor, Maxine scissored her feet and pressed her hands against the bear's crusty soldier. She pushed against the hand's surface and kicked frantically. Maxine felt her foot graze against something, and she heard a ting. She hit one of the pendant lights. Trying to twist one way and then the other to get free, Maxine saw the pendant light raise, carefully fizzling back and forth. Still being lowered excruciatingly into the seemingly bottomless, lightless well, Maxine kept fighting. Even as her skin was ravaged by searing metal, she craned her neck, looked up towards freedom. On the ceiling, she caught a glimpse of the shadow play. Her churning legs and flapping arms created a tangle of light and dark entanglements that looked like a battle between a knight and a tail-whipping dragon. Watching her struggle this way almost made it seem impersonal, like Maxine was outside of it and caught within it, not caught within it. Another powerful tug came from inside the bear, and Maxine had to admit this was happening to her, and it was very personal. Maxine slipped through farther into darkness, and then a shocking glaring gag pressure sliced through Maxine's waist, and she screamed. Through her scream, she heard a wet thump. Maxine's brain had only seconds left, but in those seconds, Maxine knew she just heard the sound of her lower body hitting the floor. The bear had bitten her in half. Mike sat in the kitchen table. He wasn't doing much of anything, just sitting there. Well, actually, he was doing something. He held a plastic and thin fake security badge, and he was turning it over and over in his hand, staring at it as if it were a crystal ball that could give him answers to his endless questions. Most of Mike's questions were related to the odd happenings in his dreams. Those questions were so compelled that he knew he had no hope in answering them. Another set of questions were related to Vanessa. What was the odd woman, but odd in a good way? Mike was powerfully drawn to her, and at the same time, she made him profoundly nervous. No way his brain could think of him out of the tangle either. Of course, there was the usual question about Mike was going to clean up the train wreck that was his life. But those questions were old and boring, and they too had no answers. So Mike settled with the most impending puzzle. How could he make up with Abby? His sister was seriously angry with him for locking her in the room the night before, As a result, she was even more distant than usual. Mike wished he could explain to Abby that everything he did was part of his attempt to take care of her. His override goal was to protect her, keep her safe, but Abby didn't want her to hear anything that Mike had to say. A few feet from Mike, a high-pitched chatter and canned laughter came from the TV. Abby sat on the office, in the sofa, but she didn't seem to be paying attention to the cartoon on the screen. She was, as usual, bent over her drawing pad. She scribbled constantly, a furrow between her burrows, her tongue clamped between her teeth and prompting from her lip. Mike sighed and stood. He walked over to the couch and sat down next to Abby. "What are you working on?" Mike asked. Abby stopped drawing. She got up and flounced into the kitchen. Sitting down in the very chair that Mike had just vacated, Mike sighed. "So, what's the plan here?" Mike asked Abby's back. She was wearing a banana yellow overalls today. The crisscross of the overalls backstrap seemed to glare at Mike. "You never going to speak to me again?" he pushed. Abby said nothing. She centered her drawing pad in front of her on the table. She arranged a dozen or so drawing pens next to it. Then she bent over her drawing again. "Seems like it," Mike thought. Mike figured the badge once more. He held it out in front of him. "I guess you don't want this then," he said. Abby looked up. Mike smiled. "Gotcha," he thought. Mike tossed the badge to Abby. She lifted a hand and caught it. "Pretty cool, right?" Mike asked. Abby held the badge and glanced at it with apparent distrust. Mike knew her well enough, however, to recognize fake nonchalance when he saw it. Maybe he cracked her armor. But no, Abby threw the badge back at Mike. He barely snatched it from the air before it hit him in the nose. Abby picked up her pencil and returned to drawing. Mike looked up at the ceiling and said loudly, "Forget it," he said. Mike stride back to the kitchen. He grabbed the knob of the junk drawer and near the sink. He went to pull it open. He jammed. He jiggled it, biting back a curse. Finally, he got the drawer open. He propped the toy badge into the other junk. He rammed the drawer back into place. Turning toward his sister, Mike said, to the back of her head, "I'm trying my best, Abby. I really am." Abby remained muted. "Okay, so it's like that," Mike thought. Mike held towards the hallway. At first, Abby didn't move, but then, out of the corner of Mike's eye, he saw her lift her head, just a little. Mike pretended he didn't see Abby's gaze flint his way. He also pretended he didn't see her expression, which looked very bit of remorseful as he found himself. "Maybe she'll come around soon," Mike told himself as he headed to the bathroom. There was nothing he could do if she didn't, and certainly there was nothing more he could do right now. On to other mysteries. Mike entered his bedroom, leaving the door open so he can listen to Abby, in case he decided to call on him, or get in some kind of trouble. Mike opened his closet and plunked his laptop from the single shelf above his pitiful, sparse collection of clothes. Heck, make that his sparse collection of his belongings, period. Mike had no furniture in his room other than a bed and a nightstand. Not just because he couldn't afford anything more, he also had no need for other pieces of furniture. He had nothing to put on the dresser or burners or desk. Besides his clothes and shoes and his laptop and a few tools, all his closet held was a box of old photographs and a plastic container of wooden blocks. The blocks had been Mike's favorite toys when he was a kid. He always loved building things. In spite of everything, he couldn't bring himself to throw the blocks out. Taking his laptop to the bed, and feeling supremely sorry for himself, Mike flunked his pillow and settled himself back against the headboard. He opened his laptop. After logging in, he clicked on his browsing icon, and he started typing in the search box. Mike began with Freddy Fazbear. He hit enter and looked at the screen. Mike's search brought him to nothing more but a bunch of stock images of Freddy and his weirdo cohorts. Mike got up close at the bunny, the chick, and the rat and the fox, as well as a few other critters he didn't know about, but he didn't find anything interesting. He backed out of the search and then he tried typing Freddy Fazbear Missing Children. "Now we're talking," Mike said as a stew of new headlights popped on the screen. Mike scanned them and he picked Sad Nights at Freddy's. Clicking on the header, Mike skimmed an article. Unfortunately, it didn't tell him much more than Vanessa had. But wait, there was an emblem video. Mike clicked the video and played the play icon. Watching the white circle spinning in the middle of the screen, Mike tapped his fingers on the side of his laptop as he waited for the video to load. Finally, the image of a blonde, pretty-nosed female reporter filled Mike's screen. The woman drop shoulders, top leggings, as well as the curly wilderness of her big hair screamed 80s, mid-80s, Mike thought. The woman had a painted-on face typical for the time. She had large eyes and a wide mouth, and at the moment both eyes and mouths were arranged in a ferretic expression of tragic regret. The woman was precise position in front of the bright, shiny version of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It was the Freddy's Mike was guarding, but it was the blast from the past variant of the place. The paint was fresh, the lighting was bright, and there was people miling around it, lots of people, and police cars. Several uniformed officers were quarreling onlookers. Men in suits, obviously detectives, were strung about importantly. The puffy-haired woman wasn't the only reporter on the screen either. A bunch of news vans were parked just beyond the ribbon of the yellow crime scene tape, which fluttered in a steady breeze. A few other men and women in microphones posed in front of the cameraman, who had heavy 80s-era video cameras weighed down the shoulders. The blonde reporter began speaking. "Tragedy struck tonight," she began predictably. "A local pizzeria, Freddy's Pizzeria, has become renowned for family fun, a great place for kids, but tonight it was anything but that. Instead, it was a heartbreaking setting of abduction and terror. 5 children who were attending a birthday event at the pizzeria suddenly and mysteriously vanished in thin air." Mike was immediately caught up on the scene. He leaned closer to his screen.